So one of our goals today, there's going to be lots of different thoughts, emotions brought up. And one of the things we hope is that today results in us feeling power, that our remembering, our act of remembering is powerful and meaningful. And so part of that power is, Brenda and I talk a lot about brave space, like what it means to hold and create brave space. Well, really, I borrowed this from Bryn's teaching. And so today, we want to hold that in our minds and hearts, like brave space. And part of brave space is exercising the muscle that may be uncomfortable sometimes of how to bear witness to hard things, painful things. And so part of the historic context of thinking about incarceration, the incarceration of our community during World War II, for us has been to really seed the idea and the facts that the incarceration of Japanese Americans was seeded much earlier by the whole history of American racism. That it wasn't just Pearl Harbor, that there were active public policies and also social ideologies that led to the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And in part of my artistic work, I'm a performer, and one of my shows it's called What We Could Carry, and it's a compilation of 13 Japanese American and others voices that gave testimony about experiences before, during, and after World War II. And there's two testifiers whose testimony I think will help reframe how we think about Japanese American incarceration. And one of them is Warren Tadashi Furutani. And in his testimony, he says that when we look at Japanese American history, we can't look at Japanese American history outside of the context of American history. We have to look at it as part of it. And he says, and when you look at history, thinking about the genocide of Native Americans, the enslavement of African slaves and then African Americans, and many other, the broken treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, he mentions. So when we think about those broad sweeps of the unfortunate inheritance of American racism, he says Japanese American incarceration is not the exception, it is the rule. That's right. And that's a really hard truth to be faced with. So when we think about that, what I want to encourage is thinking of yourself being hugged and surrounded by all of the people you love, all of the people on this bus, as we confront that really hard fact about the place we call home, about the United States of America. And the second testimony that I want to share is by a man named Bill Shinkai. And he was 5 years old when he was incarcerated during World War II. And he ends his testimony by saying that we didn't get out of camp in 1945, that we're beginning to get out of camp now. And what I think he means by that is that the act of remembering and the act of bearing witness, that is how we will liberate ourselves. That is how we can access liberation, by being together in that truth. So I just want to share those two voices which have really helped me frame this work through thinking about the power of what we're doing today. So we're headed to a part of downtown Fresno. We're in downtown Fresno, and we're headed to the area we call Chinatown, which is also a historic Japantown. So if you want to open your journals to the third page, you'll see a map. So the area that we're going, so downtown, we're just passing on our right, and we're gonna pass the railroad tracks. In a lot of places throughout the whole United States, railroad tracks were used as a border to distinguish between the areas that were valuable and the areas that were not valuable. But the metrics used were often fueled explicitly by racism. So the map you have in your journal is a 1936 map of downtown Fresno, created by the Homeowners Loan Commission, I think. And this is Fresno's redlining map. This is the map. So you'll see the different color areas. A federal program created maps in many cities throughout the United States, including Fresno, which determined where federally sponsored mortgage lending would happen through the GI Bill. And other lending institutions use these maps to determine where they would lend for people to buy housing. And these maps were not based on objective fact. They were really based on both classism and racism. So Chinatown and historic J-Town this technically was it was marked as commercial, but just to my right, your left, that area, southwest Fresno, that is the long red strip that you see. So I just highlight this to show the unfortunate reality that this map was created in 1936. So this is well before World War II. And the language that's used, I just want to read from the 1936 report that went along with this map. So the area of Chinatown is described like this. This large red area contains the most mixed population of any part of the city of Fresno. This is Nikiko. In this context, mixed is not a compliment. In it are found Japanese, Chinese, this is from 1936, Negroes, uneducated Italians, and a few representatives of several other races. Most of these people are laborers whose income range from about $600 to $1,200. The area has no uniformity in its building, and there is little pride of ownership shown. There's also on your map a little red kind of square that's in downtown Fresno. It's just a small square. Yeah, it's kind of in the middle of the gray hatch marks, the gray hatch mark area. So that area was described this way in the same report. This area, which is entirely surrounded by the business district of Fresno, is about 85% occupied by Armenians, most of whom are uneducated. It is claimed that this is the least desirable type of Armenian, the educated group being found in other parts of the city. So these, for me, are really hard to read. It makes me angry, it makes me sad, but I think it's really important to realize these words really inscribed racism into the geography of Fresno. And unfortunately, it means that we continue to see investment in certain parts of Fresno and not in others. And unfortunately, that is being replicated in downtown Fresno. On the north side of the railroad tracks, there's money being infused by both city, federal, state, and private investors. And here in Chinatown, I see lots of pride and lots of people who have identity with this place, but the dollars don't flow in the same direction. So we're gonna head, do you mind guiding us to, do you know the office?
I actually don't.
Just go turn at Central Fish and it's like a block in. So we're about to head to an organization, a new organization called Chinatown Fresno Foundation, which is working to try to change the narrative of Chinatown, commemorate the history of the people who lived here, and we're going to talk with one of their staffers. And up in their gallery space, they have a map, a huge map of historic Japantown. So this is late 1930s, 1940, pre-World War II, this place, Japantown. And we'll go in and see the map, and we'll see a contrasting archive of the life here in contrast to that explicitly racist report from the federal government. So So we'll go in, and we can view the map in the gallery. We were going to encourage us to do a little walking tour, and to kind of really situate ourselves. But because the weather it's so rainy, I think we might just stay in the gallery space, and we'll have a conversation with Jan Minami, who is a staff member. So we're now in Chinatown and historic Japantown, and you can see Komodo's department store. You can see these archives of the life and the vitality that is part of our history. It's just after F Street.
Right after F Street.
It's a mosque now.
Yes, there's a mosque across the street.
No, in the Komodo.
Yeah. Across the street from Central Fish, which is still a thriving grocery store. So this is Jan Minami. She's a staff member here.
I'm the executive director of the Chinatown Fresno Foundation. You may have seen the signs outside.
And this is Morgan Doizaki, who is such an important leader in Chinatown in the Japanese American community. Also manager-owner of Central Fish Company. And a really important part of Chinatown Fresno Foundation in leading this movement of preserving history, telling our stories, and also building towards the future. Because high-speed rail is there's supposed to be a station just within walking distance. So before we talk to Morgan and Jan more, I want to orient ourselves a little bit with this beautiful map, which was created. There's Ben Pease. He has been working to preserve maps of Japantowns throughout the entire state of California. When you think of San Francisco, LA, San Jose, they still have thriving Japantowns. But there were Japantowns in many, many, many different towns, cities, Sacramento, in California before World War II. So this map, let's orient ourselves. Okay, I should have brought a pointer. Maybe I'll switch spots with you. Okay, so we are, and Morgan, correct me, we are...
Kern of anybody's.
Right.
So you're on Kern, but that
And
way.
here
that's
is...
F right there.
We're like right here, right? Yeah. So we're physically right now, right here. So if we were to go back in time, this map is pre-World War II. All of these buildings were full of so much life. A Fresno fish market, Yoshimine Cafe, a tailor, beauty parlor, 2 restaurants right next to each other, a massage place, a barber, a Tokiwa bath, which I assume was Japanese style bath house, sewing, newspaper and printing. There's a sushi place here. There's a tofu shop where they made their own tofu. And this, if we go up the block so that's that way, Central Fish is here today. And again, pre-World War II, there were just more barbershops, a pool hall, Nishida Pool Hall, another restaurant, a grocery store. And right here, I want to point out Kogetsudo, candy store, and Manjuya, they still exist today in the same place. And if you go in, so it's that way, across the street, they have a picture of their pre-World War II shop. So they pretty amazing that they lasted. Morgan, when did your family start grossing here?
That in 1979.
Okay.
Before that, it was a few stores down. That started in 1950.
Okay, so
I think it was like 1507. Probably Kern Street.
right here.
Yeah, concert.
The Henmi grocery store?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. When I arrived in 1972, many of the stores still existed, and I wish I knew which store left here, what year, really, since then. I can recognize them. Yeah, my memory is getting very vague, but you know, many of them I say, yeah. Just when we
Nippon
say,
building.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we're in Nippon Building 2 right now.
This whole
No,
thing, right?
no, it's just, I think just like
This
right there.
side?
Yeah. Nippon.
And above was lodging before. There's still the space is still there, but people lived and stayed in there. Some of them were kind of like boarding places, right?
Yeah.
Hotel.
Yeah.
And hotel.
Yeah.
So one second. So I just want to contrast this map to the description that I read on the bus that described this area as lacking pride and ownership. We looked at the redlining maps.
Yeah.
So this map is, I think it's pretty clear to see the opposite was true. This was a thriving community space. Even for me, just reading the names, Sekimoto, Tanaka, Fujio, Wakita, Tokiwa, I feel pride that Japanese names donned the businesses here. Yes, Jan.
That map is exclusively Japanese-owned businesses.
Right.
Yes.
The one, the white map has other cultures
Culture came in,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah. I see.
Yes, thank you
Oh,
for
I
pointing
see,
that
I
out.
see.
Yeah, so this area was not not only Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants lived here. There were Armenians, Chinese immigrants, Armenian and Armenian Americans, Latinxes,
see.
some working class white folk, Italians. So here you can see just like the density of life, the density of life in this space.
Nikiko, what
Yes.
was the percentage of the population of Japanese folks in Fresno in that time?
So, I don't know. Did anybody know the percentage? I would guess it was in the single digits compared to the whole of Fresno, like either city or county.
Yeah, city,
Yeah.
but single digits 1 or single digits 9?
I don't, you know, honestly, I don't.
5 to 9, I would say.
5 to 9. So a huge percentage, actually, huh?
Quite a
Significant,
large
yeah.
percentage. And at japanatlas.com, there also is a map that is broader scope outside of Chinatown
Yeah.
that shows Japanese-owned businesses clustered sort of in this area. So they didn't extend throughout Fresno. Of course, Fresno wasn't as big as it is now either,
Right.
but it was the Japanese life was centered here.
Yes.
Because the Japanese church was completely different
Yes.
area, not in this area. So I think that's all area is also another Japanese people live. That's I remember I did lots of
That makes
interviews
sense.
at that time. Yeah.
And I know a little bit more of the agricultural history because I'm a farmer, but for kind of like a interesting context. So in 1940, so again before World War II, 45% of all Japanese Americans were involved directly in agriculture. So while we might not have been not even close to majority population in California, the Japanese American community had a lot of power in agriculture. And there's actually evidence that is part of the reason, part of the rationale that actually motivated people to incarcerate our community. The Madera County Public Library has a record of a letter from a senator, a very known racist white senator from 1940 that inquires from the city of Madera how much acreage Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans owned and worked. And that wasn't a request to support them, it was a request to map. Like all of the, one of the things is like the more and more I study about this history, like they're technologies of racism. Like they're actually strategies that are kind of hidden in plain sight, that lead to really horrible things. So knowing about them is how we can help stop them from happening again. So if we could just like take a moment, like go back in time, like close your eyes and like think about this thriving heartbeat of Japanese American culture, Japanese American businesses, and revive some of that spirit that our ancestors walked these streets eating food, sharing stories, sharing this place of Fresno. So if you open your eyes, I hope you can help tell this story. Again, in contrast to the redlining map that we showed before. So we were gonna walk around so we could like actually observe this state of things now, but it's so bad weather. So maybe we'll just turn to Morgan and Jan if I can just ask you some fun questions. I love it's like the newlywed game. You're like,
She didn't prep us on this, let me tell you.
no, these are fun questions. So maybe if you can share just your general, what is Chinatown Fresno Foundation? How did you come to be? What are you focused on? What are your hopes?
Well, I can tell you it started because of Morgan. The state of California is funding $70 million of infrastructure investment in downtown, Chinatown, and Southwest in correlation to the high-speed rail. So that was entirely a community process, and it was very important to get the Chinatown community together and organized so there could be a voice that projects located here, because both downtown and Southwest were much more organized. And so Morgan was in charge on that. A number of business and property owners came. And when it came to the point where there needed to be a voice, we held some meetings starting in August of 2017, and were able to be an active participant in how the projects were selected. So from that, the group of us that were organizing the meetings decided that we should form the Chinatown Fresno Foundation. So we were formed in January of 2018. We spent a year really dedicated and also looking for money because what we committed to the property and business owners, that this would not be an assessment of them while there was such a struggle economically in this area. We needed to find other sources of funding, which we now have done. So we have an office, we have the gallery that we're going to put rotating cultures. And we are starting, you may have seen the Chinatown Empowerment Center out there. We've partnered with about a dozen business and job service providers like SCORE and Small Business Development and Workforce Development Board and banks and EDC, just a broad range of providers who've agreed to come into Chinatown and offer their services in our center. So we're able to provide business training, job training, personal development, entrepreneurship, startup businesses. We even had the idea that we would match potential entrepreneurs with economical storefronts or locations. So it could be a huge boost. We're to the point where we're almost ready to launch that. So we don't have any success stories with it yet, but we expect to have success stories very soon. We have if you want to talk about the board and support that stuff, dedicated board.
Yeah, well, you know, Chinatown hasn't had an actual nonprofit since 2009. So forming together to actually be a unified voice was very important to our area. We've been able to accomplish a lot. We didn't realize how much support we actually have in Chinatown, which is good. But we have, our board mainly consists of, in our bylaws, it has to be 75% property owners. So we have a good feel for
Property and business.
property and business
Yeah.
owners. Oh, yeah. You know, we have some good things going on. We have an events committee now. Hopefully you guys can come to our next event to I think we have, is there like, you guys have like a sign-in sheet?
Yeah, we can share information.
We would love that. We have been tried to be really strong in communication. So we have an e-newsletter that goes out a couple times a month. We have community meetings on a regular basis. So we're able to share topics of importance with the community. We just had one last week that actually was pretty exciting. We got some new people we haven't seen before who are interested in topics. We talked about how property owners with no trespassing signs can work with the police department to enforce no trespassing on the properties. And we also talked about this project, the Transformative Climate Change, TCC, and our primary project, which is a streets project. F Street, Kern Street, so on this map,
So out the window is
Yeah,
Kern Street,
yeah.
and F, we passed F
is that
there,
cross right there. As well as two other streets down, Tulare and Mariposa will be getting some treatments, plus China Alley used to be very vibrant. It's on that map right there.
here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and there are a number of
Central Fish is right here.
yeah, there are a number
Behind.
of businesses that have China Alley addresses, like that Bing Pong
Pongs.
Association is one of them. And so that's going to get permeable pavement, which is going to be pretty cool, and some trees. So we get trees, sidewalks, pedestrian lighting to make it a much more pleasant place to walk around. So, where are we?
And we should say, Yonsei Memory Project should say thank you to you all for supporting us too. Several people who are here today found out about our bus ride through your newsletter.
Really?
Yes.
Well, good.
So thank you so much for including. So I just have a couple more questions, and then we thought we'd give people time to look around the gallery, because right now Japanese American history is up in the gallery. So Chan and Morgan, what is the one thing about Chinatown / historic Japantown that you wish everybody knew?
That we're here. We're alive and thriving, and we will get better.
There are people.
Everybody go
And
eat
you
at
can buy the
Central
best
Fish.
Yeah, there are people in Fresno who do not know this exists.
Right.
Yes.
I'm always coming across people who say,
Yes.
"We don't have a Chinatown." Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do. And some of the businesses are well known. Primarily, the successful businesses are restaurants and barbershops. So if you're in need of good food or get your hair cut, salons, here's a good place to look. But as we develop and through the Empowerment Center, start new businesses, attract new businesses, there'll be more options, certainly.
Well, I'm on a personal crusade to, just like, I think I heard you say that there's not a lot of people that know that this place exists. But Kern Street, out of all the streets, I mean, F is our main street because it's the center of Chinatown Street. And also Kern's also the center if you, on the traditional map of Chinatown. But Kern Street is definitely a Japanese street, in my opinion, out of Chinatown. And Chinatown's also recognized by, can you name all the
Let me get a cheat sheet.
So
Excuse me, thank you.
I would like to see Kern Street, just like Audra McDonald Way in downtown. It's still M Street, but it is recognized for Audra McDonald. Kern Street, hopefully, I think there's down to 2 finalists. It's Yonsei Street or Nikkei Street. But with support from the community, hopefully we can get Kern Street honored, not for ethnicity's sake, but for history reasons, so people don't forget that this was very, and from Komodo's Union Bank, which is right behind that window, is still Mitsubishi owned. It's the last of the Japanese banks. Used to be called Bank of Tokyo. So from Central Fish to Komodo's, we're in
Major.
we're in Nippon Building 2, there's Nippon Building 1, which is just Japan Building 1, Japan Building 2, down to the temple, is still visible that it's still Japanese. So before things get torn down or, just like to get that honored. So that's one thing I'd like people to know.
Thanks.
So
I'm with you. Go
there
ahead,
were
Jen.
11 documented cultures that were required to locate here. It started with the Chinese immigrants when Fresno used to be located up by Millerton, and when it moved down here for the railroads, the Chinese immigrants had been, they were builders. They were brought to this country for the cross-country railroad, but they were stonemasons and brick builders, and they were builders. And so they were the ones building the buildings, and at a fairly soon point, the powerful white people decided that the Chinese people should move across the tracks. They didn't want to live in and amongst them. They wanted their places built, but they didn't want to live together. And that was really how the Chinatowns and ethnic cultures located in China at that time. It just wasn't allowed. It's crazy, but yeah. So, of the 11 documented groups, they include people originally from Africa, Armenia, China, Greece, Japan, Italy, Mexico, the Philippines, and Portugal, as well as Basque people from northern Spain and southern France, and Volga Russians from Germany. So with our gallery, we're going to focus on eventually all 11 cultures,
Nice.
but starting with Japanese culture.
Thank
So,
you.
look around. There's some really interesting things. These, the bulk of them, and the description boards are, yes, primarily from the Japanese American Citizens League District Council. They had prepared them for. Do you know what? I don't know what they were prepared for originally.
I think it's
An
accumulation over time.
exhibition, yeah.
Yeah, and they still use them for some purposes. They allowed us to borrow them, and then we built upon that. So the rooms are sort of grouped, and we'll have the doors open and the lights on for the rooms that have displays. And there's a case out here with artifacts, and we'll just be around. So if you have any questions, please ask.
I think there were a couple of questions. I saw some hands.
Yeah.
We don't have time right now. Should we do the questions?
Were there questions?
I saw Reza.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, okay. One-on-one.
I got a little side thing here. In the 60s and 70s, this I'm Yonsei. Okay, we used to come down here a lot because of the Buddhist church. I know Ron and Kathy were involved in this Nishinaka as well. We all came for the social events here, but we knew all of Japanese town here. And it was really thriving then.
Yeah.
You know, but that's something that was, the 60s and 70s. We came here for the restaurants. We came here for everything. But it was something that
Ice cream.
Ice cream, yes.
I have heard a lot of stories about it.
Yeah.
Good ice cream shop, and everybody bought their shoes at Dick's.
Raise your hand if you have memories here.
Can they be family memories?
Sure, yeah. So if anybody who's raising their hand right now, if anyone else wants to ask questions of this and share beautiful memories, that would be lovely. I want to give us time to just kind of let all this settle in as we exercise that muscle of bearing witness to this place. So we'll have about 8-ish minutes for you to talk or be silent, and then we'll make our way to our next stop. So thank you, Jan and Morgan, so much for welcoming us.
Recognizing that there's something here that you can connect to. It's very important to us.
And we'll send out via email a link to Chinatown Fresno Foundation after today. but many were also leasing. Like my family was leasing land. So anyone who was leasing land lost. In this area, a lot of people grew grapes for raisins, and harvest is in September. And the edict, Executive Order 966, was February. People were in detention May, June, July, and August. So my family and many Japanese Americans lost their entire crop for that year. And then people who did own land, because everyone who was not Japanese American knew that Japanese Americans only had days or weeks to sell everything, people bought land, tractors, cars, houses for pennies on the dollar. There are a few stories of good neighbors, particularly Armenian Americans, who watched over property for Japanese Americans, and when they returned after camp, gave them all of their profits for those years, as well as their homes. But unfortunately, those are very few stories. And while those are important stories to remember, I also think it's really important to remember that that was not the majority. So people lost everything. They lost everything that they worked for. Do anything. Yeah, keep going. Thank you. Collaboration. Sure, Kim, yeah.
About the assembly center in Pinedale that held almost 5,000 people. Why were they moved to fairgrounds? Were they saying
Good question about the Assembly Center at Pinedale, another detention center built here in the valley. Those were different people, actually, a different group of people who were detained there. Some of them came from like Washington, Sacramento, and similar to the fairgrounds, were detained there for the months leading up, to the incarceration. In a couple of minutes, I'll just say a few words about Simonian Farms. We'll be there in about 10 minutes. So we'll be back. What we're going to see, which is called the Soul Consoling Tower, and it was commissioned by Armenian American farmer Dennis Simonian in 2013. And Dennis got a call from a company that said, hey, we have a bunch of lumber, we have a bunch of wood that we're not using. Do you want the wood? And then Dennis found out that the wood was actually from barracks that were built in Poston, Arizona. So it was barrack wood that had detained the Japanese American community at one of the camps in Poston, Arizona. And Dennis, as he speaks about it, says that he was moved to build this Soul Consoling Tower to sort of honor the Japanese, speaking of farmers and farm communities, to honor the 5 Japanese American farming communities, families that had helped him when he was coming up and he was becoming in charge of his farm and his business. So in one quote in the Fresno Bee, Dennis Simonian says that the process of building the tower cleaned his soul. It cleaned his soul, and hence calling it the Soul Consoling Tower. For us, it really represents sort of an act of solidarity, right? An act of really honoring another cultural community, learning about them, paying tribute, standing alongside. And so much of our work, besides remembering the past and addressing those histories and keeping them alive, has been thinking about how the struggles of Japanese Americans connect with so many of the struggles happening today around civil liberties, around racist practices, policies, this language of emergency of the border security and the othering and the racism that's happening like right now all the time around us. These patterns that Nikiko spoke about in the beginning are continuing, right? So this, besides being just an incredible monument remembering Japanese Americans and the history, the monument also sort of represents that kind of work of coming together from different cultures and getting to know each other and fighting for each other. So let's see. Wanted to also note that Yonsei Memory Project, we've done a couple of different programs here at Simonian Farms. We've had two other bus tours. This is our third, and we've always come here. We've always stopped here at Simonian Farms, and we've done different sort of activities. One activity we did was we had people on one of our first bus tours. We had them stand together in the tower and do a silent sort of silent eye gazing activity where they stood together in the tower, and some of them were strangers, and they sort of witnessed each other for a minute while they were standing in the space. We've also had people just explore the space silently on their own, writing down different words and images that they saw. You'll see there's some poetry, there's some framing remarks, there's some just really powerful objects around the tower as well. So today, because of the rain, we wanted to kind of, whatever feels good to you. If you'd like to venture out of the bus and explore the tower and read the remarks there and look at the objects, you're totally welcome to. For those of you that would just maybe like to sit on the bus and kind of gaze out of the window and look at the tower, that's totally fine. One activity we had in mind using your journals is whatever's coming up for you. Again, just kind of like when we started at the Assembly Center this morning, just writing down words, phrases, feelings, observations, kind of turning on your journalist hat a little bit, your writer hats, any phrases, sensations, anything that's coming to you. And if you'd like, an added, this is my writer-teacher hat on, but an added layer to the activity besides just journaling about what you're seeing is to create what I call like a list poem, where you sort of compile maybe a list of those 10 phrases, observations, images that you're collecting. Just compile them into a list of 10 items, and perhaps we'll have a little bit of time later for folks to read some of those observations. So added bonus activity, doing a little bit of a list poem exercise, again from the bus or when we arrive.
でもリメンバリングのあれが2月って言ってたので、その頃にツアーを。でもリメンバリングのあれが2月って言ってたので、その頃にツアーを。
We thought we'd just kind of pause here for a minute before we get on the road again, and just kind of do some little bit of a discussion and just seeing where folks are at and what's coming up. But to do that, we thought we'd introduce we were going to do a sort of outside, which is a little bit of a spectrum activity, but I think we can still do it in the bus. So we'll offer up a couple poles of a spectrum. We'll say, like, an example is like,
I'm really, really tired. That's one end of the pole, and like maybe that's number like 5. Like scale of 1 to 5, I'm really, really tired. 0 being I'm super awake. So I'm super awake is 0. I'm getting really, really tired is 5. So what you'll do is we'll ask you for that we'll give you that scale, and then if you're like a 0, you can put up, your fist. If you're a 2, you can put up a 2 on that scale. If you're a 5, if you're really, really tired, you would say 5 fingers, right? So our first question on the spectrum is, so 0, 1 is these monuments that we're visiting today, these places, are about the past. They're kind of, conjuring up the past and thinking about the past. 5 is actually, these are about the future, these places and these monuments. They're really, they make me think about the future. And then 3 being in the middle, maybe a little bit of both for different reasons. Okay, so let me think about my number. Okay, so when you're ready, you hold up your hand with the number on that spectrum that you're at. 0 being past, 5 being future. And some 4s. 5, 3.
3.5.
Yeah. So we'll maybe ask a couple of folks, maybe Brandon, why you, let's bring up the 5 for you.
Well, as the cliche goes, you learn history, understand what the present situation is. When I see downtown Fresno's Chinatown, I saw what the past was like, and I saw the current status of it, and I'm hopeful for the future. And likewise, this symbol here, when I walk through the door, but in front of you there's a wall, and next to it there's another door. So it gives you hope that even though right now, present that you're facing, you're bumping into a wall, it's dark, it's natural, it's made out of wood. You look up, there's hope. You look right, you move forward, there's hope. So, yes, the past is sad. Perhaps the current situation is also hopeless. But if you look at it, this symbols, especially this one here, gives you hope that there is a future, there's a brighter future. In particular, when an Armenian looks up this physical barrier or physical structure to symbolize another different family or families, it gives me that there's still hope for humanity. I know, as cliche as it sounds, that's what I think this symbol here tells me, that there's hope from what the past has, a dark past.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon, you said the word hope a lot there, and that was, but almost this really complex hope, because you're also weaving in the past and the complexity of the present. You're seeing the open sky above. And, really beautiful. How about somebody who's had a 1 or a 2? Anyone's 1s or 2s? Or how about someone with the, Aldia?
I had a 2.
You had a 2, Aldia?
And I thought that was because there are ways that, maybe I won't say we, maybe I'll just say I. There are ways that I don't know where I come from. There are ways that I don't know what happened. And there are ways that experiences like this can wake me up to where I come from, what I'm made of, who I am. And in ways also that I think that the past, sometimes I think that that now we're better than we were before, and I think also that's not true. I think that it was in the past when, like as Brandon was saying, that to have neighbors even of different cultural identities stand with and beside people, because even if we don't come from this exact same background or even the exact same food, our experiences are still connected and together. And that's a thing that has been happening for a long time, and that I should probably be holding myself and my community to a higher standard instead of thinking that we're getting so much better.
So it sounds like a lot of powerful self-reflection going on, self-community, where do I come from? How do we hold our own communities and ourselves to different standards in this work, in this memory work, we sometimes call it. maybe one more person, maybe someone who's in the middle at a 3 or 4 wanted to share. Yeah, Romy.
I'll share. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
You know, just I can't help but be in the middle because as a sensei, you know, my loyalty, the way I show my gratitude towards my ancestors is just by thinking about them, by honoring them, by never forgetting about them. You know, so that is my third generation homage to make sure that their legacy continues. My grandmother, my you know, grandmother, my mom, my dad. But you know, just being in that structure, you know, like you said, looking up, and that's the exact, you know, feeling that I got, you know, just hope and just breath, especially with the clean air and the rain coming down, and it was just so beautiful, you know, and just to keep that close to your heart, but just move on, learn from it, and just keep strong and move forward.
Thank you, Romy. It's beautiful, Romy. Yeah, Romy was sort of reflecting on the way as a Sansei you've paid, you've honored, you've remembered your ancestors, your family, and you're holding that past really close, and yet you're standing in the tower and the rain is coming down, and like Brandon's image of the hope and the freshness, and you're holding that as well. I think, you know, sometimes we use the metaphor of stretching our muscles, literally holding, like we're holding, you know, we're holding emotionally, we're holding physically, we're kind of building our capacities for holding the complexity of the past, the present, and the future. That's so much of what memory work is for us, is getting strong so we can hold all that and help each other hold all that. Thank you, Roman. Maybe we'll do one more. We have one more spectrum, just activity or question. So maybe on this kind of the 0-1 place, this experience is feeling like unsettling or confusing, or just some feelings of confusion and unsettlement coming up. And then towards the 4-5 space, feelings of like clarity kind of arising for you. Feeling of having some different answers, clarity. So just kind of a gauging of kind of emotionally kind of where folks are at. So let's reflect on that kind of confusion to clarity, or unsettling to clarity. Okay. Folks who want to kind of share, or maybe what about Marlies, maybe? Yeah, Marlies, did you want to kind of share your answer with us? Or?
Yeah, I think well, I'm not from Fresno, so I think for me the history of the aerial business hall, a lot of it is like, you know, very specifically here. A lot of places new. Learning about names and people who were here, and you know, this specific like neighborhood geographic. So to me, that's clear. I'm getting a better sense of like the area historically. This is my first time here, and I think you know,
thinking about connections to now, current policies, current things happening in regards to immigration, and then also bringing in the outsider perspective from, you're here from Seattle, you're visiting, you're new to Fresno, you're new to all of it, and I mean, what a great perspective for us to have too in the group, just to see it, also these things through your eyes, like what's being lit up, and so we're so glad you're here. Yeah. Ron, maybe. Ron, are you open to sharing? Okay, so you had a 4 up there.
I think all of what you're doing matters. Because as you look to the future and for the future generations, it's important that they know the past and the history of our generation and other generations. And it's good to see this happening.
Thank you, Ron.
I was impressed with the foundation. I had always heard about a foundation in West Fresno, but finally they connected to somebody who I've known from the past.
Yeah. It's great. So the foundation experience was great to connect for Ron, and good to think about this work continuing. Yeah, the education continuing through the generations. Thank you. Let's change it. Okay. So we're adapting our schedule for for the rain. We were going to do stuff here and then do stuff back at the fairgrounds, but because of the rain, I think we'll do the bulk of our kind of conclusion here, and then we can ride back and we'll depart. So before we make our way back, we got a few questions. So one of the questions is, I think, a question about how can we do better to understand Japanese American experiences on a deeper level. And so I think we have some ideas, but we'd love to open it up to the group to talk about, like, what are effective, especially I know there's a lot of educators on the bus, what are effective ways of telling these stories to invite people to feel on a deeper level.
With first graders now. I taught high school for many years, and it's a different breed of first graders, but we tell stories to build resilience. And I don't know of any children's stories that bring this home. Like this next week, I'm reading the Ruby Bridges story to the kids, but I don't know of anything that would tell them about the child who got sent to a camp.
Delane is an educator that works with first graders, and she was commenting that she doesn't know of books that for that young level, grade level, to talk about Japanese American history. And what's great is we've talked about compiling a list, and so we can definitely send out. I saw a hand.
I teach preschool, and there's a great book, not specifically just about Japanese American history, but I think it's really great just to contextualize what it's like to be an immigrant, like growing up in America as a kid, and it's called I'm New Here.
I'm New Here.
Yeah, and it's by Anne Sibley O'Brien, and I highly recommend it.
Anne Sibley O'Brien. Okay.
It's super great.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, and we can definitely send out a couple links. There's, off the top of my head, there's a book called Baseball Saved Us, which is about children in camp through the lens of playing baseball. There's it's a little bit older, I think maybe 6th, 7th, 8th grade.
A chapter book?
No, the Baseball Saved Us is a picture book.
Oh, okay.
There's a chapter book about Fred Korematsu by Stan Yogi, which is very excellent. But I think that's maybe a little bit older. And there's a couple other books that we've been collecting, so we can absolutely send out a list.
And I've tried also, just out of my own pocket, so to speak, is to buy books for their library, because so many of the books, I'm at Columbia, and so many of the books are our traditional white people books. You know? So the children that go there aren't white. So it's like, can we show them a diverse sense of, you know, that they have, that their feelings shouldn't be the white kids' feelings necessarily, that their feelings are, can be honored and be accepted, and, you know, that people can, we all have different feelings, but a lot of it is the same. We need to show that to the kids at different ages.
This is a great idea, thinking about how literature, especially for children, can really honor kids of color, and that their experiences are different than white kids, and that a lot of literature, the norm defaults to white. So this is a really great idea. Resin.
But they should be written by folks of color. That's
Right.
important. But I wanted to say, like, something I love about Yonsei and other groups like is that it's storytelling. You know, you brought up storytelling, and memory is important because the United States exists as it does because we have this severe case of amnesia. You know, we like to forget our past and move on somehow, and I think Yonsei is not, and these structures and the storytelling is not an answer to the Trumps of the world. It's an answer to everybody else who says, this is not the America that I know. This is not what... No, this is exactly what America is. America has a history of separating people. America has a history of destroying families. And for us to tell those stories is the only way we really can change anything. Because if we think it's all peachy, sorry, if we think it's all peachy and beautiful and there were these little pockets of hatred, it's really hard to do any change making.
Right. Thank you, Reza, for reminding us of the importance of storytelling as a vehicle, and that we really kind of expand our aperture to look at not these isolated incidences, but this whole structure, which is really baked into the fundamentals of the United States, which excludes, separates, and really punishes people of color in this country. Thank you for the reminder, Reza. There's just two other questions. So I'm sorry, I'm not good at reading handwriting. I think this question is asking about the relationship between Japanese Americans and silence. This one here? Yeah. So I talked I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that I think my Yonsei reading of our community, and I defer to other people in our community to share as well, but my understanding is the trauma, the actual trauma of the camp experience led people to post-camp focus on rebuilding their lives as a survival mechanism. And so as generations have passed, I feel that it's really my responsibility to be a voice, because I have distance from the firsthand experience of trauma, but I also, as Yonsei, we have inherited collective trauma. So that part of my kind of reframing of silence has been to understand with empathy that silence can be a powerful mechanism of survival. It's not always balking to powers that be. It can be just your way of staying alive. That said, it is really important, this is why I think Bryn and I do this work, to speak out and to make sure that the silence is not being used as a tool of making other struggles invisible.
Yeah, one of our first gatherings we had 2 years ago was an intergenerational gathering, about half this size, just within the Japanese and American community. We had Nisei, Sansei, Gosei, Yonsei get together, go on a bus tour, and then we met afterwards and shared stories and reflected. And some of the Yonsei and Gosei, some of the Yonsei in the room said it was really healing for them to hear stories from like Saburo and Marian Masada, the Nisei, who were sharing their firsthand experiences of the camps, because they had never heard those stories from their grandparents, because there was silence, there was shame. So there was a catharsis happening sort of in the room as these stories were circulating. Finally, these Yonsei, who'd never got to hear any details, heard them firsthand from survivors, and there was a lot of healing, I think, from both generations, and that happening. So So storytelling, again, like Reza mentioned, storytelling at the core of that experience.
And the last question is about API, Asian American Pacific Islander solidarity, asking how Japanese American communities can connect to a broader Asian American Pacific Islander population here and movement. Bryn, do you wanna go ahead? Yeah, so, well, I mean, and again, anybody raise your hand if you have something to offer. We had hoped to do this in a circle, so it's a little bit more conducive to dialogue, but we're blessed with the rain. We are blessed with rain. So I will be really honest, and I don't think I have done a good enough job building relationships and spending time really thinking about a wider Asian American Pacific Islander movement and where our leverage points are powerful together. And I think part of it for me is really a struggle of how do you do this work? How do you mobilize resources to organize a day like today and have time to do that really important solidarity building? I think that Yonsei Memory Project has done better building bridges with the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno, with Sukaina as the new executive director of CARE in Fresno, and Reza as the director of Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno. And I think we can do a much better job of reaching out. And I'm really glad Brandon is here as a really important public leader in the Hmong American community. And I think that there's a lot of possibility, and I want to hold myself accountable to a long view, and when I'm tired of reminding myself that this is really important.
Yeah, were there other just thoughts from folks on any of those questions or anything to offer up on any of those threads?
Okay, so we're gonna do our last kind of formal program right now. Let's see. Oh, here they are. So again, we were gonna do this like standing around the fountain, but I think this will be okay because there's a tattoo expo at the fairgrounds today that opens at noon. So I think there's gonna be lots of people. Okay, so I'd love for you to take out your journals. And if anybody lost their pen, just let me know. I have more pens. So we're gonna do two things. So on your in your journal, I'd love for you to write, what is the smallest thing you can do to incorporate thinking about powerful histories in your life? What's the smallest thing you can do to incorporate a day like today in your life? Yeah, the question is, what's the smallest thing you can do after today to honor important histories? It could be Japanese American specifically, or more general, your own community or any community. What's the smallest thing you can do to ritualize witnessing history? And you can give yourself more time to write, but I just want to introduce the final activity. Bryn just passed out a postcard to each of you. This is part of Yonsei Memory Project's, I think, growing postcard pedagogy. So we invite you to write a postcard to yourself. Please address it to yourself. And all of them have a beginning already. Dear future self, I want to remember. So we invite you to write yourself a postcard. It could be about today, it could be about something larger, but just something you want to remind yourself of, that you learned today, that you saw today, that you felt today. And we will send these postcards to you at an unknown date in the future, so it'll be a surprise from yourself. And you'll be impressed with how wise you are. So as you write these, you can write them now, write them as we make our way back. You can take time on the bus when we get back to the fairgrounds to finish them. And I have a basket, and Bryn and I will collect them as we exit. So this concludes our formal programming, and we just invite you to take a second before you exit the bus to think about the names you encountered today, the names you wrote in your journal, to think about everyone who went on the journey today, and thank yourself too for being present. So with that, Javier, we can head back to the Fresno Fairgrounds. Let's give Javier a round of applause for being a really wonderful guide.
Welcome.
Thank you.